So if you're pouring your life into something meaningful, a business, a nonprofit, any big initiative, you probably know this feeling.
Oh, yeah.
It's that chronic exhaustion. You spend years building these projects, right? You're managing timelines, you're obsessing over the KPIs, and you're just pushing this massive boulder up a hill.
And then, if you're really honest with yourself, you have that moment where you realize the second your personal energy dips, the whole thing just stalls.
It starts to crumble.
It starts to crumble. And that kind of burnout, it's usually not a sign that you're just doing too much. It's a sign that you're carrying a structural weight you were never, ever meant to hold by yourself.
Right. And the research we looked at for this deep dive, it unpacks this exact struggle. It draws this really clear structural line between a human-led project and what the sources are calling a God-sized movement.
And it really is all about alignment. We've gotten so good, incredibly good at professional efficiency.
Yeah.
But in the process, we've sometimes traded that spiritual fire for, a business strategy. We're experts at doing the metrics, the output, and we lose the posture of just being in alignment.
So, okay, let me see if I have this right. A project is something I do for a cause. I use my resources, my control.
Yes.
But a movement is something that happens through me. It requires my surrender. Is that the shift?
That is the fundamental shift. So our mission today really is to give you the language to figure out where your own initiative sits. Is it driven by your ambition, or is it flowing from a divine invitation?
It's sort of a shortcut to investing your energy where there's actual enduring momentum.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with what the sources call a man-sized goal. This seems to be the danger zone. Why is that? I mean, a goal you can actually achieve feels like a success, not a trap.
Well, that's the subtlety of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
A man-sized goal is, on the surface, perfectly respectable. You can hit it with a big enough budget, a solid marketing plan, and just grit.
Yeah.
And when you succeed, you've built a monument. But the catch is, it's a monument to your effort.
Ah.
And so the problem is when human resources or just enthusiasm starts to wane, and it always does, the monument crumbles because it never had an independent energy source.
And this is where the two logics just radically clash. A project is sustained by human control.
Absolutely.
It's measurable, manageable. It rewards predictability, efficiency. It's designed to keep us in the driver's seat.
But movements, they operate on a completely different logic. The Bible calls it divine human synergy, and they are inherently disruptive to our comfort.
They don't fit on an org chart.
They refuse to stay in the boxes.
Yeah.
And they demand this kind of radical humility and faith from everyone involved, precisely because you are not in control of the outcome.
And the tragedy is when we get them confused, we run a project, we call it a movement, and then we're left wondering why we're so cynical and burnt out.
Right. Shouldering burdens we were never meant to carry. The work keeps going, but the wonder is just gone. And you can see this shift in the wider culture, too. People aren't just looking for another polished program anymore. They are searching for something real, something rooted in a deeper alignment that's sustained by presence, not just performance.
We need a classic example of this project mentality when it goes wrong. What's the historical prototype the research pointed to?
It's the Tower of Babel.
Mm.
It is the perfect blueprint for a sacred project gone wrong.
Yeah.
So Genesis tells us the builders, they wanted unity, they wanted legacy. They said, let us build ourselves a city and a tower.
Let us build.
Exactly. Their mistake wasn't ingenuity, it was autonomy. They were the initiators. They set the timeline, they set the scope. God was no longer the source of the idea. He was just the assumed beneficiary who was supposed to bless their pre-approved plan.
That sounds alarmingly familiar. It's what the sources called sacred productivity,
Precisely.
where success is measured by output, not by, relational obedience.
Yes. And in that kind of system, busyness becomes a kind of spiritual anesthetic.
Yeah.
Feels like faithfulness, but really it's just letting us avoid the painful silence you need for real discernment.
Can you give us a quick example of that, where distraction displaces that attentiveness?
Absolutely. The classic one is Martha and Mary in the book of Luke. Martha was busy, she was serving, rushing around,
Doing good things.
praiseworthy things by any modern standard.
Yeah.
But Jesus corrects her, and not for serving, but because she was distracted and anxious and troubled about many things. Her activity, no matter how pious, had pushed aside her attentiveness to the one thing that was necessary.
Right.
Listening. Busyness just numbs the part of us that can tell if we're acting in obedience or just, filling a calendar.
It's so unsettling how often we do that. I feel like I've been reaching out to study the Ark more times than I want to admit.
Substituting urgency for obedience.
Yeah. So what is the core theological reason that God refuses to just be a project manager for us?
Because he refuses to share his glory. It's why he so often and so deliberately chooses the small and the weak. Think about Gideon's army being cut down to just 300 men.
Right. Or David being anointed while he's out tending sheep.
Exactly. It's done specifically to make sure that when the movement succeeds, no one can possibly claim credit. If a job can be done entirely by human grit, then the glory belongs entirely to the humans.
Okay, so if that's the risk with a project, what's the anatomy of a true movement? How does it actually start and sustain itself differently?
A true movement has a really distinct biblical anatomy. First, it always begins with revelation. God speaks.
So it's not an idea we cook up in a strategy session.
Not at all. Abram leaves his home not because he saw a good real estate opportunity, but because he received a calling. Period. Second, it's sustained by divine breath.
Like Ezekiel's vision.
The valley of dry bones, right? No amount of organizational skill could revive those bones. It was the wind of the Spirit.
And what's the third element?
It advances through surrendered vessels. And the perfect example here is Mary. Her contribution wasn't capacity or a strategic plan.
It was just her availability.
It was her obedience. Let it be to me according to your word. The human part is our yes, our availability, not our control.
Which brings us back to that idea of divine-human synergy. The sources are so careful to say this is not an equal partnership.
No, it's a sacred mystery. We labor, and our work is necessary. Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but it's never the ultimate factor.
Yet God gave the growth.
That's the core paradox. God accomplishes his purposes completely, yet somehow he dignifies our human obedience in a meaningful way. And we see this modeled perfectly by Jesus himself.
He says he does nothing of his own accord.
But only what he sees the Father doing. That radical posture of deep, listening reliance, that is the absolute heart of true movement leadership.
And when you look at these movements in Scripture, the pattern is just so clear. God prioritizes formation before expansion.
Yes, we always want fast growth.
And he wants deep roots.
Look at Abraham. God's movement began not with an org chart or, infrastructure, but with a summons. Go from your country to the land I will show you.
With no map.
No map, no timeline. He moved entirely because the voice was trusted. And it shows that movements at birth are often incredibly fragile. They're sustained by faith, not by force.
And then you have Moses and Israel in the wilderness. The sources really hit this point hard, that deliverance is easier than discipleship.
Oh, absolutely.
So those 40 years, they weren't a detour, they were the main event, a crucible for formation.
Exactly right. The manna taught daily dependence. You couldn't hoard it, you couldn't make a long-term plan.
Right.
Water from the rock taught provision on God's timing, not theirs. God intentionally sacrificed speed and efficiency to prioritize holiness and trust and just patient maturation. Any movement that tries to skip that formation process, it just burns out.
And then finally, Pentecost. The early church, they didn't engineer a global expansion plan. They didn't have a big strategic meeting.
Right.
They waited in prayer and obedience for that promised power from on high.
And when the Spirit came, the movement exploded. It was organic, it was irresistible, it crossed every boundary and went far beyond any human control, proving the Spirit can't be domesticated or, forced onto our timetable.
And you even see historical echoes of this.
You do, like
Wow.
the First Great Awakening. The leaders then saw themselves as interpreters of a work God had already started, not architects of it.
Yeah.
They measured success by transformed lives, not attendance metrics.
Okay, this brings us to the central challenge for you, the listener, the leader who's wrestling with this feeling of exhaustion. How do you diagnose your own work?
Right.
It's about shifting our posture, isn't it? From being the architect who owns the solution to being the steward who just tends what God has started.
And the research gives us a really clear, actionable framework for this. We're calling them the 5 diagnostic questions. And they're not about your effort. They're all about your alignment.
Okay, let's run through them. The first one is all about the source. Who initiated this? Was it God through revelation, or was it us through strategy?
Because if the answer is strategy, your success depends entirely on you. But if the answer is revelation, your success depends on your obedience to the one who called you. Which leads right to question 2. Can it survive without constant human control?
That's the real gut check, isn't it? If I step away for a week and the wheels just fall off, then I've built a project that's totally dependent on me.
A movement should have a life of its own.
Yeah.
And you often find the answer to that in question 3. Is prayer foundational or ornamental?
Mm.
I mean, does prayer genuinely shape your vision? Does it define your strategy and actually alter your direction? Or is it just a check on a religious box to validate a plan you already made?
If the prayer meeting always gets canceled for the planning meeting, you've got your answer. Which takes us to number 4. Are people being transformed or merely mobilized?
Are you seeing real spiritual maturity,
Mm.
deep change, heart transformation, or are you just seeing more activity, more attendance? People are doing more, but they aren't actually growing closer to the source of the movement.
And the final critical test, which really sums up this whole deep dive, is number 5. Does it deepen dependence on God or confidence in systems?
Right.
Does your success point your team toward greater trust in the Creator? Or do they walk away patting themselves on the back for their technique?
Stewardship is just recognizing that our role is necessary, but it's never ultimate. It means making hard decisions to protect the integrity of the movement, prioritizing that obedience, even if it means sacrificing popularity or, institutional confidence.
This has been a really critical deep dive.
Yeah.
It's the difference between building something and breeding something. We've seen that movements, they just can't be rushed or managed into a smaller version of themselves.
They thrive in dependence, and they will always, always falter under human control.
So the whole focus shifts. You move from that exhausting question, what should we build for God?
To a much deeper, much more humble question. Where is God already moving, and will we follow him there?
So as you go back into your work, here's the core philosophical challenge for you to really mull over. What might fundamentally change in your efforts if the outcome you're seeking cannot be engineered but can only be stewarded?
Embracing true movement leadership.
Yeah.
It is demanding. It requires faithful attention, yes.
Yeah.
But it is also profoundly life-giving. It releases you from that crushing pressure of personal ambition and replaces it with the spiritual confidence that only flows from partnering with something so much larger than yourself.